This book here, Robert Morgan was one of our guest speakers this summer when I was on sabbatical. And he's got this book called 100 Bible Verses That Made America. This has been my favorite book of 2020. Okay, so if you're watching online, order it online. Loop Campus, we've got these at Corner Books if you want to pick one up. And so other campuses, as you're watching, you can order online as well and all that sort of stuff. So this has been my favorite book. You know why? It goes through, and it basically takes in about 3 to 4 pages, each different one, and it goes back from like the 1700s and gives you a little snippet of American history and a Bible verse that influenced it. And you know why I liked it? I'll read this. It's kind of even a devotional, and I'll read it, I'll be like, wow, that's worse than coronavirus. Wow, that's worse than this, that, and the other. We made it through. Look at how God provided. What did it do? It's blessing and encouragement that things have happened all throughout the course of our nation, and God has provided and done miraculous things in our nation. Because it's real easy for us to get real close to it, isn't it? And all we can see is the news reports from today. We got to get a little further away and go, wait a minute. God, help us with this and to see us through. So one that I want to share with you, it was one that happened August 16th, 1864. So a month or so ago, a little less than a month ago from where we are right now. I mean, in like hundreds something years, but on the calendar, August 16th, 1864. And what it was is during the Civil War, I'd never really thought about this. In the Civil War, they would capture Union soldiers and they'd capture Confederate soldiers and they'd put them into prisoner of war camps. They would hold those soldiers. Whenever I think of prisoner of war, I always think of World War II. Isn't that what you think of? Well, here they had a camp in Andersonville, Georgia, and it was where they would hold Union soldiers in Andersonville, Georgia. It was 26 acres, and it was built to hold about 10,000 people. That's a lot of people. But yet they had 33,000 people were held there. They had a little stream that would go through it. And as they would go through this, it had a 15-foot high fence around it. The stream would go through the land. Can you imagine the filth that stream became with everybody drinking out of it, with all of the waste that was there? The stream became just toxic. And so they joined together. There was a guy that he was a chaplain, if you will. And so he was there as a Union soldier that was captured. And he sat down on this stump and he said, guys, I was reading this morning in Numbers chapter 20, verse 11, that Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice. And with his rod, he struck it, and the water came out abundantly. Man, we've got to pray that God provides water. If we don't get miraculous provision of water, we're toast, and we're all going to die. Things are that bad. So they began to pray that night, and they prayed that next morning. They got together, and they prayed that next night together, and they began to pray for several days. And he said to this, anytime you wake up in the night, you just pray, God, bring the water. God, bring the water. We're going to pray again tomorrow. And they just kept praying, and they kept praying. And so it went further on, and then this is the quote from the man that was the chaplain that I was telling you about. Here's his quote. All of a sudden, black clouds started rolling in, and here's this quote. That crashes of thunder broke over our heads. Flashes of lightning swirled around us as if the air was filled with short circuits. As a mighty deluge swept through, through the clearing west of the prison, we bowed our heads in preparation for submersion. When it came upon us, the sensation was as if 1,000,000 buckets of water were being poured out at once. And then a prisoner finally started to scream out, a spring, a spring. What would happen is they had a line, and they called it the dead line. If you stepped over the line, you were shot right there on the spot. If you stayed within the dead line, then you could stay there as a prisoner of war. A lightning bolt had shot down into the ground, and it shot on the right side of the dead line, on the prisoner side of the dead line, so they would have access to this. It hit the ground, and it knocked loose through the rock and goes down to then untap what it says this. During the storm, a lightning bolt struck inside the dead line, releasing the underground spring. The trough was built and bringing an endless supply of water to the prisoners. The spring, cheer after this, the spring still gurgles to this day. What happened? The people were desperate because they were going through a very difficult time. They turned to God and they said, God, we need your rain from heaven. Not only a deluge of rain, a lightning bolt hits the ground, a spring pops up, and they begin to drink from that spring. And if you were to visit right now Andersonville, you would go on the tour of the National Prisoner of War Museum. And you would get to a stone shelter, and you would see what is called the Providence Spring. And the inscription next to it says this: God smote the hillside and gave them a drink on August 16th, 1864. I tell you this, God's got a lightning bolt for us, guys. He's got a lightning bolt for us. Tough and difficult times that you're going through personally or nationally or in the state or your business or whatever it is, God's got a lightning bolt. If we'll turn to Him, what He'll do is He'll knock it on the ground, and that spring will pop up, and we will just begin to drink out of revelation the blessing and the encouragement that is there. So, yeah, there's some beasts coming out of the sea, and yeah, there's some seals and some trumpets and some bowls, and it gets crazy. But that's not the point of what God's trying to do. He wants us to drink from a pure stream of a vision of what's going to happen on this planet Earth.
Hey, thanks for watching. To find out more about Houston's First, you can subscribe to our channel or you can go to houstonsfirst.org.